If you're new here, hello. If you've been here before, then hello and welcome back to another episode. How are we this week? Have we watched any good pilot episodes? Because I don't know about you, but there is just such little time in the week and so much to bloody watch. So this week I have selected just one pilot episode to watch and pick apart for you. So for the next 20-ish minutes, we'll be looking at Channel 4's new drama thriller, The Couple Next Door. Here's a general breakdown of how we do things over here on the pilot principle. I start with giving you a quick synopsis before looking at who's who in the pilot episode. I'm talking writers, directors, and cast. Next, I break down the first 10 minutes before taking a closer look at the principal characters and delving into some of my favourite and least favourite lines or moments from the pilot episode. Then I round things up with a look at the end of episode hook and finally see if the pilot episode has done its job, because the pilot episode needs to earn its keep and convince us to watch an entire series, or at least the second episode. I'm Jen and this is what we're working with for The Couple Next Door. Firstly, a look at the pilot synopsis. Evie and Pete are a happily married couple who have just moved into a stunning new house in the suburbs. But when they strike up a friendship with their neighbours, Danny and Becca, lines become blurred and friendships begin to veer towards entanglements. So keep that in mind as we run through the credits for The Couple Next Door, though it has to be said that they technically don't live next door to each other, they actually live across the road from one another, but I suppose the couple across the way doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Anyway, pilot title, There Is None, which is really starting to feel like a British TV thing. So let's just move on to episode length. And we are looking at approximately 42 minutes for the pilot, which reminds me of the good old days. As we discuss the editorial staff and crew, I'm going to whiz through and just rattle off a couple of things that they're known for because I can get really caught up in this bit. The pilot episode for The Couple Next Door, and in fact the entire series, was written by David Allison. Allison has also created and written the series Bedlam, and he also wrote episodes of the series Marcella. The Couple Next Door, both the pilot episode and the series, was directed by Dries Vos, who also served as an executive producer. He is a Belgian director who directed the internationally recognised comedy series What If, as well as De Dag. In the English language, he's done Professor T for ITV and Suspect for Channel 4. Right, moving on to cast. The Couple Next Door stars Sam Heughan as Danny, and Heughan is likely known to most for his role as Jamie Fraser in the historical drama series Outlander. I freaking loved the first few series of Outlander. I did stop at some point, but now that I've heard that it's cancelled, I'm going to go back and either rewatch the whole thing. I'm just kidding, there's no time for that. I'm gonna find a recap online and then pick up where I left off. Anyway, back to Heughan, who has also starred in Voss's Suspect and the films Love Again and SAS Red Notice. Next, we have Eleanor Tomlinson, who plays Evie. Tomlinson had a long-running role on the BBC series Poldark, where she played Demelza. Do you know what? I love a period drama, me, so I have also seen and really enjoyed Poldark. Tomlinson has also starred in the series Death Comes to Pemberley, Ordeal by Innocence, Intergalactic, The Outlaws, and The Nevers. Next, we have Jessica DeGauw, who plays Becca, and the Australian actress has starred in the series Dracula, Arrow, Underground, The Crown, Pennyworth, The Secret She Keeps, and Court. Finally, of the two couples, we have Alfred Enoch, who plays Pete. Enoch's first 7 credits as an actor were in the Harry Potter film franchise, where he played Dean Thomas. He also starred in the series Broadchurch, Sherlock, Troy, Fall of a City, and Trust Me on This Side of the Pond. Across the water, he had a long-running role in the series How to Get Away with Murder, playing the lead role of Wes Gibbon. Finally, on the short cast list, we have Hugh Dennis, who plays Alan. Dennis has been up and down the British TV sphere, starring in the likes of My Hero, if anybody remembers that series, Outnumbered, Fleabag, and Not Going Out, to name a few. As mentioned, The Couple Next Door is airing on Channel 4, hence the running time, because it has to work around 3 advert breaks within the space of an hour. The Couple Next Door is also showing in the US on Stars, I believe, but I did read somewhere that it's not coming out until next year. And The Couple Next Door has a series length of 6 episodes. Now, just to be absolutely clear, this series, The Couple Next Door, is a British remake of a Dutch drama, the name of which I'm about to butcher, neighbours, which translates to new neighbours. Now, what you shouldn't do is something I did, which led to a whole host of confusion. The series, The Couple Next Door, is not in any way, shape or form an adaptation of the novel The Couple Next Door, written by Shari Lepiner, which is about a couple who leaves their baby alone to go for dinner with friends next door and come home to find the baby is gone. The book is wild, but it's not this. Now that we've ironed that all out, let's move forward. In terms of what made me want to watch the series, well, I must have been watching an episode of Location when I saw an advert for The Couple Next Door, and I thought, damn, what a sexy cast. I recognised Heughan, Tomlinson and Enoch and thought, why the hell not? Plus, I think it's so rare for me to see adverts for programmes on terrestrial television, so The Couple Next Door is actually the first Channel 4 pilot I'm looking at on the pilot principle, which is nice to change things up. I mean, not everything is BBC and Sky, you know, there are other channels. Okay, now we are ready to dive into the first 10 minutes of The Couple Next Door. Why the first 10 minutes? Because I was always taught that this is the part of any script, feature or pilot that needs to grip their reader turn audience to keep them from switching off. So The Couple Next Door starts like this. We see a cabin in the woods through some trees before hearing a gunshot and the scream of a woman. Then a figure in white, the supposed screaming woman, runs out of the cabin and races through the woods in her nightclothes. This we later learn is Evie. We then have a few more people running through the woods, a man and woman running together, Danny and Becca, and Danny looks like he's recently taken a few punches. A fourth and final person runs through the woods, Pete, and he holds a gun in his hand as he calls out for Evie, telling her to stop. There's a whirlwind of successive shots. Pete pointing the gun at Danny and Becca, Pete pointing at Evie, and then this all comes to a head when Danny lunges for Pete and the gun goes off for the second time. We then cut to the title, The Couple Next Door, and words were lost. I mean, talk about an explosive intro because, your girl has questions. We then cut to what must be earlier, and we watch Evie and Pete drive into their brand new neighbourhood and home in suburbia. Becca, seeing the move-in van, introduces herself and notices that Evie is pregnant. Becca calls her husband Danny over and they help the new couple move in. When Evie and Pete are alone, they discuss their new neighbours, with Pete making it clear that he's not a fan of Mr. Muscleman Danny. Across the street, Evie and Pete are being discussed by Becca and Danny, and Becca is hopeful that they'll become their new friends. However, Danny isn't so sure, as he's certain that Pete doesn't like him. And you know what? He's not wrong. Then we are watching Becca and Danny through the lens of a telescope from across the road. And on the other side of the lens is Alan, who watches the couple as things between them get intimate. Spying seems to be the theme, as the next morning, Evie watches Danny leave for work all in black and leathers as he swings onto his motorbike. And they learn from his clothes that he's some sort of police officer. Following that, it's the humdrum of life, as we then learn that Evie is a primary school teacher and Pete is a journalist who is working on a story on a corrupt individual named Robbie Spencer. Unfortunately, his boss says it's a no-go due to lack of resources and tells him to drop it. And that is the first 10 minutes. And can I also just add that I recorded this episode as it's not being shown on a streaming site or the BBC, so I have to contend with adverts. And on that 10-minute mark, advert. So the theory is the theory, people. Before we talk about the main characters, here's a couple of main plot points in the pilot episode so you're not fully lost. Firstly, Evie, who is pregnant when they move into their new area, unfortunately loses her baby during the course of the pilot episode. Danny, who is a motorcycle police officer, if that's a thing, is in need of some extra cash and takes on an illegal moonlighting gig escorting a car from A to B. Finally, Danny and Becca are swingers. Now, there are two dictionary definitions for the term swingers. Firstly, a lively and fashionable person who goes to a lot of social events. And secondly, a person who engages in group sex or the swapping of sexual partners. In this case, it's the second one. And we get the impression that this is led by Becca, but let's just say Danny doesn't seem to mind. Right, now that we are all on the same page, let's talk characters, starting with Danny. Danny is a northern lad of few words, but who strikes us as the kind of person who speaks his mind and is more likely to act first and ask questions later, if at all, to be honest. But he's not stupid and he has a sense of morals, which is reflected by his initial reluctance to do some illegal cash in hand work. Now, we don't know what leads the couples to the woods, of course, but from what we learn about Danny, him putting himself in harm's way to save others makes sense for what he's going to do in the future. Next, Danny's wife, Becca. Becca is a carefree and loving woman who is excited about having a couple around their age to hang out with. She comes across as open and honest. However, if her husband starts to stray, it's hard to say how she'll deal with this. She may encourage swapping sexual partners, but I don't know if she'll be quite as relaxed if it came to people that she had to see every day. I'd also say that she won't put up with any nonsense. Her interaction with Alan is cold and direct, as she tells him she won't take him on for one-to-one yoga lessons and to find a more suitable class for his skill level. In the flash forward, she is protecting Danny when Pete holds a gun in their direction, which makes me think she's the forgiving sort, even if it came to infidelity. Next, we have Evie, and over the course of the pilot episode, she changes. She's all optimism, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and excited to start this next chapter of her life with her husband and soon-to-be child when tragedy strikes. The Evie we meet next is different. She's morphed into a person that even her husband scarcely recognises. She's standing up to her strict religious parents, wanting to ride on a motorbike and making very obvious eyes at Danny. Which is why I would say Evie is the most unpredictable of the bunch, as she's testing out the boundaries of her new outlook on life, one that seems to lean her towards grabbing every opportunity before the universe can take it away from you. It makes me want to say that this new Evie in the future is at least partly responsible for bringing the house down around her. Whether or not we sympathise with her is to be seen. Finally, we have Pete. And you know what? Every group needs a sensible one, and Pete is it. He's self-deprecating about his strength compared to Danny, as well as the fact that he's to blame for him and Evie not being able to have children. From what his editor said, he's like a dog with a bone when he gets an idea about something. And as a journalist, he doesn't miss the obvious, such as, in this case, his wife's wandering eyes. Kind of like with Evie, it's hard to imagine Pete in the past matching up with the Pete in the future. And from what we meet of this person, I'm almost inclined to believe that the whole thing is just a misunderstanding. That, Pete must have fell and tripped into holding a gun in his hand. His legs must have taken him on a running wander through the woods. And his arms acted of their own accord as he was pointing the gun at his wife and neighbours. We so far haven't seen any signs of anger from him, but infidelity, if that's where this series is going, can lead people into a blinding rage. I mean, they don't call it a crime of passion for nothing. Okay, now that we've discussed the questionable protagonist, let's move on to the antagonist. And from the pilot episode, I believe we've got two. One that we get the sense of and another that we see in action. We never meet Robbie Spencer, but he comes up twice in the pilot and is cloaked as a corrupt figure. We don't know how far that corruption extends and his level of violence that goes with it, if any, but we get the sense that we should be afraid of him. Secondly, and most predominantly in this episode, is the creeper next door, Alan, who is obsessed with Becca. He goes to her advanced yoga classes, watches her through a telescope, and downloads pictures from her Facebook and saves it in a locked folder in his computer. I mean, just major ick vibes from the start, really. Now, it's impossible to say if he's simply a surveyor or if his voyeuristic ways will turn into action. On the other hand, his job could very simply be to watch and observe, and who knows what he'll see and who he'll tell. One of my favourite things about the pilot episode of The Couple Next Door is how action and facial expressions are used throughout. The first example is when Danny single-handedly picks up the dishwasher that Pete has been struggling to get out of the moval van. This tells us that he is strong. The appreciative look Evie gives him tells us that she finds his display of strength attractive, and Pete, all but rolling his eyes and throwing up his hands in a strop, tells us that he finds Danny intimidating. There are other things too. When Pete's editor, after reading his piece on a corrupt individual, slams the file down on the table, the file has a sticky note attached to it with the individual's name, Robbie Spencer, and a picture of them. I think because a lot of the program is about observing things you shouldn't be observing, that it's really amped up and effectively used the art of show, don't tell. So yeah, that was just really creatively well done, I think. And it means you have to pay extra attention. You can't sort of lift your eyes away from the screen. You have to be watching to notice all the subtle nuances taking place throughout. On the flippity flip side, in terms of what I didn't like, there's actually nothing too specific. I will say, because I'll always find something to say, that it did feel quite surreal every time we were in their suburban neighbourhood, because it honestly felt like it would be more at home on Wisteria Lane or Ramsay Street, not in Leeds, which is where the series takes place. Moving on to the end of episode Hook, where we have a very dramatic, smouldering look in the rain between Danny and Evie. And so the episode ends on the question of will they, won't they, which, to be honest, isn't the best hook in the world, if you ask me. Not just because I was worried about her catching a cold, but because I think there are just so many other things that have been teased throughout the episode that would have been nice to come to more of a head at the end to lead us into episode 2. In terms of the serial arc, I've broken it up into what I can imagine taking place based on the individual characters. So firstly, with Danny, will his illegal moonlighting job lead him into trouble? Why is he in financial trouble that he needs the extra cash in the first place? Will he end up putting himself in harm's way for the mysterious Robbie Spencer? Next, with Becca, she has an unknown stalker, and the question is, how far will that stalker go in order to get close to her? Also, there is clearly an attraction between her husband, Danny, and her neighbour, Evie. Now, is this something she's going to encourage, or will it send her into a jealous rage? With Evie, she wants a baby more than anything in the world, and it's not something her husband can give her. She's changed after her miscarriage. How will her more adventurous and erratic energy seep into her married life, and the married life of her neighbours? Finally, with Pete, even though he's been told not to pursue Robbie Spencer as a story, odds are he will. And what will he find? Will it put him in harm's way? Will he see Danny working for Spencer? What will he think? And how will he react to his wife's attraction to Danny? As you can see, there is presumably, from my point of view at least, lots and lots and lots to work with over the course of the remaining 5 episodes. So now there's only one question left to ask. Will I be continuing with the couple next door? Pause for dramatic effect. Yes. Each character has their own storyline, and with Robbie Spencer at the centre, we've already seen how some of those will intersect. The question is eagerly anticipating how and when. The drama is not that complicated. There's no wild serial killers running amok. It's regular people leading regularly messy lives. And that's kind of refreshing of late. And if you ask me, even though it's not any more realistic, it feels real. Finally, even though the bastards cheated with such an intense opening minute, I know all will not be revealed for some time. So I'm curious to know how Evie and Pete got to that point, especially as we've now seen how they started. But that's just me. If you like your mysteries led by a British detective, then this one is not for you. If you prefer to have a singular protagonist and antagonist to your thrillers who circle each other like koi fish, then again, you might want to skip The Couple Next Door. And finally, if a slow burn is not up your suburban streets as we wait to find out just what went down in the woods, then quit while you're ahead and find something else to watch. The last thing to do is to give the pilot episode of The Couple Next Door a score out of 5. And do you know what? This is a bit of a tricky one. I'm trying to resist giving half points, but I'm stuck between a 2 and a 3. Let's hash out the reasons and maybe it will help me come to some sort of a conclusion. Even though I think it's cheeky to have such a dramatic opening sequence that we never come back to, it was a fantastic pilot hook. A gun, a woman in white, the woods, everything was in slow motion and edited with pace in mind. It was great. Next, we have a clear understanding, not just of place, the creepy suburbia, but of character. And that's pretty difficult to do given that there are 4 main characters and there's only 45 minutes to do it in. However, by the end of the episode, I know exactly who these people are and how they'd likely react in a given situation. Lastly to mention, I suppose, is tone, and it was quite a hard one to pin down. Despite it being described as a thriller, the only major thrilling element of the episode took place in that opening. There was an undercurrent of suspense running under the pilot episode, but that did get overshadowed at point by Evie's miscarriage storyline. You know what, with that all being said and done, I think I'm going to go with 3, but let me know if you would have swung in the other direction. And yes, as always, the pun was very much intended. Now that we've hashed out the fundamental principles, will you be giving the pilot episode a watch? Or have you already continued watching The Couple Next Door as the episodes have been released on Channel 4? Or have you gone straight for the jugular and binged the whole series, which is available to watch on 4OD? Either way, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are thus far. Let me know over on Threads, Instagram or Twitter/X @PilotPrinciple, where you can also drop a suggestion for what you'd like me to review next. Remember to follow and rate this podcast on your audio streamer of choice. Have a lovely week, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Aww.